Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are immersing ourselves in the life of a true global icon, someone whose influence spans far, far beyond the silver screen. We're talking about Bruce Lee.
Absolutely. An individual whose legacy touches martial arts, Hollywood, philosophy, and even, the very DNA of modern competitive fighting, like MMA.
It's incredible. And when we look at the sources on Lee Junfan, his birth name, you quickly realize, yeah, we aren't just talking about a famous actor.
Not at all. We're looking at a groundbreaking polymath. A martial artist who truly revolutionized his discipline, a pioneering filmmaker, producer, screenwriter, and maybe most importantly for his lasting impact, a profound philosopher.
And his career. Well, it was tragically cut short. He died at just 32.
32. Unbelievably young. But in that short time, he created this massive, truly enduring global legacy. It's quite something.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our mission today is to dive deep into the material, the sources we've gathered, and really try to separate the legend because there's so much mythology around him from the verifiable facts.
Yeah, we need to get past the posters and the sound bites.
Exactly. To understand the true depth of his impact on cinema, obviously, but also on the foundation of combat sports, MMA especially, and his unique blend of Eastern and Western philosophy.
And maybe the place to start, the first real nugget, is his dual identity.
Yeah.
It's fundamental.
How so?
Well, Bruce Lee was born in San Francisco, Chinatown, San Francisco, 1940.
Yeah.
That automatically gave him U.S. citizenship. It's called just solely the right of the soil.
Okay, so American citizen by birth.
Right. But, and this is the key, he was raised almost entirely across the Pacific in British Hong Kong.
Ah, okay.
So that foundation, that duality, American-born, Chinese-raised, it's absolutely critical. You have to understand the conflicts and the connections that shaped the man who eventually sort of bridged those two worlds.
That makes sense. It sets the stage for everything else. Let's dig into those formative years then.
So the 1940s, he's born right into the film world, really. His father, Li Hoi Chuen, was a very famous Cantonese opera singer and film actor.
So exposure to performance was immediate?
Instantaneous. In fact, his very first screen role, he was just 4 months old, carried onto the stage as a baby in the film Golden Gate Girl.
Wow. 4 months?
Yeah. And this early visibility, this immersion, it led directly to his famous Chinese stage name, Li Sulong.
Which means?
Li the Little Dragon. And it wasn't just, a cool name. It was deeply symbolic. He was born in both the hour and the year of the dragon in the Chinese zodiac.
Huh. Okay. So the Little Dragon nickname stuck.
It absolutely did. And by the time he was a teenager, he'd already been in something like 20 films in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Child actor.
But the family story is more complicated than just a famous dad, right? The sources mention quite a bit of confusion or contradiction about his mother, Grace Ho.
That's a fascinating aspect, and it really speaks to Hong Kong's complex colonial history and, his own identity puzzle.
What's the story there?
Well, the sort of standard narrative for a long time was that Grace Ho was half German Catholic. But later research, digging into records, brought up other possibilities. Some evidence points to her father being a man named Charles Maurice Bozeman, who's apparently a Dutch Jew, and her mother being Chinese. Other accounts suggest maybe her mother was English. It's murky.
But regardless of the exact mix.
Regardless, her family connections were immense. She's the half-niece of Sir Robert Hotung.
The Hotung clan. That's huge in Hong Kong history.
Enormously powerful. The absolute pinnacle of Hong Kong's wealthy, influential Eurasian elite.
So Bruce Lee came from serious privilege, connected to this kind of mixed-race aristocracy.
He did, which makes his teenage years even more striking. Yeah. Because this privileged kid was, by all accounts, a terrible student academically.
And getting into trouble.
Constantly. Serious trouble. Hong Kong in the 50s, especially Kowloon where he lived, was tough. Huge influx of refugees, lots of tension.
Right.
Lee wasn't hitting the books. He was involved in frequent, really violent gang fights, street fights, and those legendary Hong Kong rooftop fights.
Right, the rooftop fights, that was a real subculture.
A brutal one. And it was this constant fighting that finally pushed his father to insist he get formal martial arts training. Not for sport, but for discipline and, frankly, survival.
So martial arts wasn't initially about art or philosophy for him. It was practical.
Very much so. He started young, around age 7, learning Wu-style Tai Chi from his father. That's a softer style.
Okay.
But the real foundation, the one that stuck, was Wing Chun. He started learning under the legendary Grandmaster Ip Man.
The Ip Man.
The Ip Man. Although sources suggest that while Ip Man was his sifu, his master, a lot of the day-to-day instruction actually came from senior students, guys like Wang Shunlung and William Chung.
Why was that?
Apparently, Ip Man usually saved his most direct personal teaching for older, more advanced students.
Mm.
But here's where it gets really critical for understanding Li's later path.
What's that?
His ancestry. Because his mother had European heritage, some of Ip Man's other students actually tried to get him kicked out. They objected to teaching a non-pure Chinese person.
Seriously, because he was mixed race.
Yes. It sounds shocking now, maybe, but you have to remember the context. Chinese martial arts circles back then, especially post-Boxer Rebellion, were very protective, very insular. There were strong, unwritten rules against teaching secrets to non-Asians.
Wow.
So Li, being Eurasian, was immediately an outsider, a source of friction in that very traditional environment. It really set the stage for his lifelong rebellion against martial arts dogma.
But despite that resistance, he clearly had talent. And it wasn't just Wing Chun, right? He was boxing, too.
Oh, yeah. He wasn't limiting himself even then.
Yeah.
In 1958, he entered the Hong Kong Schools boxing tournament and just dominated. Knocked out the reigning champion, a British kid named Gary Elms, in the final.
So already showing that cross-disciplinary aptitude.
Absolutely. A natural fighter, pulling from different sources.
Mm.
But the street fighting eventually caught up with him in a big way. The final straw, the event that led to him being sent to America in 1959, wasn't just a scuffle. It was serious. He got into a rooftop fight, apparently with students from a rival school, and he beat up the son of a powerful, feared triad family.
Oh, boy. Triads.
Yeah. Beat him so badly one of his teeth got knocked out. The police got involved. His mother actually had to go down and sign papers taking legal responsibility.
That sounds like a situation that could have escalated badly.
Lethally. The threat of triad retaliation was very real. So, given the danger, plus his terrible school record and dim prospects for college in Hong Kong, his parents made a decision.
Use the U.S. citizenship.
Exactly. Time to leverage that San Francisco birth certificate. They sent him off to Seattle, where his older sister Agnes was already living. Gave him, what, $100?
Just $100. Wow.
Landed in Seattle, worked as a live-in waiter at a relative's restaurant. Eventually, he enrolled at the University of Washington. His major was officially drama.
Interesting choice.
Yeah, but his real passion, his intellectual curiosity, quickly gravitated towards philosophy and psychology. You could already see the thinker emerging alongside the fighter.
So Seattle, this isn't just him running away from trouble anymore. This is where Bruce Lee, the teacher, the innovator, starts to emerge.
Absolutely. It's a huge shift. He starts teaching martial arts pretty quickly. He called his style Jun Fan Gung Fu, basically Bruce Lee's Kung Fu. It was his take on Wing Chun, but already more dynamic, more personalized.
And who was he teaching, given the resistance he faced back in Hong Kong?
That's what's so telling. Remember how he was nearly barred because he was mixed race? The moment he starts teaching himself, he throws the doors wide open.
To everyone.
Everyone. His early students in Seattle were incredibly diverse racially. Jesse Glover, often cited as his very first student, was African-American. Taki Kimura, who became his first assistant instructor and a lifelong friend, was Japanese-American. This inclusivity was completely revolutionary for Chinese martial arts at that time.
So already breaking the mold. And he wasn't just teaching Wing Chun straight, was he? He was innovating.
Constantly tinkering, developing specific techniques that became iconic, like the one-inch punch.
Ah, yes, the one-inch punch. Incredible power from no distance.
Exactly. Pure kinetic linking and focus. And he was already looking outside Kung Fu, studying Muhammad Ali's footwork, for instance. Absorbing techniques from Western boxing, integrating them, building something new.
And the wider martial arts world started to notice him around 1964.
Yes, the 1964 Long Beach International Karate Championships. That was a major moment. He wasn't just performing katas, he was demonstrating his philosophy, his power, and maybe throwing down a gauntlet.
What did he do there?
He demonstrated the one-inch punch. The volunteer he hit, Bob Baker, apparently flew back several feet, hit a chair, and later said he had chest pain for days and told Lee never to do that to him again.
Wow.
And he did those incredible two-finger push-ups, showing off phenomenal strength and control. But it wasn't just a show. He also used the platform to openly, quite aggressively, criticize traditional martial arts karate, classical kung fu styles. He argued they were too rigid, too formal, completely impractical for real street fighting.
That must have ruffled some feathers.
Oh, big time. Especially among the traditional Chinese martial arts community, particularly in Oakland, California, where he'd opened a second school. That criticism directly led to a very famous, very controversial confrontation.
The fight with Wang Jackman.
Exactly. The private match in Oakland, 1964. Wang Jackman was a respected master of several traditional styles, Xing Yi Quan, Northern Shaolin, Tai Chi. This fight, and more importantly, Lee's reaction to the fight became the absolute catalyst for his biggest innovation.
Okay, so let's try to untangle this, because the stories about why it happened and what happened are totally different, right?
Completely contradictory. You got two main versions. Lee's version, supported by his wife Linda and others close to him.
What did they say?
They claimed the traditional Chinese martial arts establishment in San Francisco issued an ultimatum. Stop teaching non-Chinese students, or face Wong Jack Man in a challenge match. If Lee lost, he'd have to shut down his school. Lee, being Lee, accepted the challenge.
And the outcome, according to them,
A decisive, quick victory for Lee. Linda Lee Cadwell described it as lasting maybe 3 minutes, ending with Lee getting Wong on the ground, pounding him, and Wong submitting. This version fits Lee's narrative perfectly. The young rebel challenging and defeating the old guard over tradition.
okay. Now, what's Wong Jackman's side of the story?
Totally different. Wong and his supporters vehemently denied there was ever any ultimatum about teaching non-Chinese people. Wong himself said he didn't care who Lee taught.
So why the fight then?
Wong claimed he only requested the match after Lee had been publicly boasting at a theater demonstration that he could beat any martial artist in San Francisco. Wong felt Lee needed the lesson in humility.
And their version of the fight itself?
Radically different. Not 3 minutes. They claimed it was a much longer, much tougher fight, lasting somewhere between 20 and 25 minutes.
25 minutes. That's an eternity in a real fight.
Exactly. And they claim it didn't end with a decisive knockout or submission. They say it ended because Lee became unusually winded, essentially exhausted. Wong also accused Lee of dirty tactics right from the start, like an attempted eye gouge instead of a formal bow, breaking traditional martial etiquette.
So we have two completely incompatible accounts. Who do we believe?
Honestly, we'll probably never know the absolute truth of what happened minute by minute. But what matters more for Lee's development is how he perceived it.
What do you mean?
Regardless of whether it was 3 minutes or 25 minutes, Lee was deeply unhappy with his own performance. He felt it took too long. He felt his traditional Wing Chun techniques, while effective, weren't efficient enough. He got tired. He realized the limitations of sticking to one rigid system in a chaotic, unpredictable fight.
So even if he won decisively, the duration and the effort told him something was wrong with his method.
Precisely. That fight, that struggle, was the definitive moment he realized classical styles were too restrictive, too impractical for the reality of combat. It forced him to fundamentally rethink everything.
And that rethinking led directly to
Jeet Kune Do, JKD. He formally introduced the name and concept around 1967.
the way of the intercepting fist.
Right. But it's crucial to understand, JKD wasn't meant to be another style. It was a philosophy, a framework.
What was the core idea?
Flexibility, adaptability, efficiency, speed, simplicity, directness, taking what works, discarding what doesn't, regardless of origin. It was about practicality in a real messy street fight.
So he was pulling from everywhere.
Everywhere useful. The footwork and fluidity of Western boxing, the powerful kicks from various kung fu styles, the timing, the distance control, the economy of motion he saw in Western fencing.
It really was the style of no style then, a true hybrid.
Exactly, which is why, ironically, he later kind of regretted even giving it the name Jeet Kune Do.
Always that.
Because putting a label on it, any label, implied it was a fixed system, a defined style with limits. And that was the exact opposite of his core philosophy.
Which was about limitlessness.
Precisely. You see it in the JKD emblem itself, the yin-yang symbol, surrounded by arrows indicating constant interplay and change, with those core Taoist-inspired phrases, using no way as way, and having no limitation as limitation. It was about liberation from fixed patterns.
Okay, so Lee's solidifying his combat philosophy, Jeet Kune Do, and around the same time, mid to late 60s, he's making inroads into American television.
Yeah, the big break there was The Green Hornet, 1966 to 67. He played Kato, the chauffeur and martial arts expert sidekick to Van Williams's Green Hornet.
And Kato became iconic. That show was huge for introducing Asian martial arts to mainstream America, wasn't it?
Absolutely pivotal. Before Kato, American audiences mostly saw clumsy, choreographed movie brawling. Lee brought authentic, lightning-fast, powerful kung fu to primetime TV. It blew people's minds.
I read somewhere that he was actually too fast for the cameras initially.
That's right. The story goes that the directors couldn't film his movements clearly. They were just a blur at the standard 24 frames per second film speed. They actually asked him to slow down.
He had to consciously restrain his speed for the camera.
Yeah. He had to find that balance, demonstrating his incredible skill, but making it, visible enough for the audience and the technology of the time. But he insisted on keeping the techniques authentic.
And that TV exposure led to other things like the crossover with Batman.
Yep, he appeared as Kato in 3 episodes of the campy Adam West Batman series, which was huge exposure. And during this Hollywood period, he also connected with other figures, like the legendary stuntman and martial artist Gene LeBell.
Ah, judo, Gene LeBell, the grappling expert.
Exactly. They became friends, trained together. Lee shared his striking expertise, and LeBell taught Lee a lot about grappling, throws, submission holds, catch wrestling, judo. Lee was always absorbing, always adding tools to his JKD toolbox.
He's building a profile, showing incredible talent. But then he hits that infamous Hollywood barrier.
The glass ceiling.
Yeah.
And the most notorious example, the one that still stings for many, is the Kung Fu television series controversy.
Right. Tell us about that. Lee pitched his own show concept, didn't he?
He did. In 1971, he developed and pitched a concept called The Warrior. It was about a Chinese martial artist wandering the American Old West. A unique blend of Eastern philosophy and Western genre.
Sounds familiar.
Right. Soon after, Warner Bros. Launched the series Kung Fu, starring David Carradine as Kwai Chang Caine, a Shaolin monk wandering the American Old West. The similarities were striking.
And they didn't cast Lee in the role he essentially created. Why not?
The official reasons given by executives at the time were frankly pretty blunt. They felt his accent was too thick for American audiences, and crucially, that casting an ethnic Chinese actor in the lead role of a major network series was too much of a commercial risk.
So racism, basically. Fear that mainstream America wouldn't accept an Asian lead.
That was certainly the implication, whether stated explicitly or not.
Yeah.
Warner Bros. Later claimed they had independently developed an identical concept from other writers. But the role went to Carradine, who famously had zero martial arts background.
That must have been devastating for Lee.
It was undoubtedly a major disappointment, a huge slight. But his public reaction, interestingly, was quite pragmatic. He was a realist about the business.
What did he say?
He basically said he understood their risk assessment from a purely business perspective. He acknowledged the financial concerns about casting a non-white star. He even said something like, if the roles were reversed and an American star came to Hong Kong, he, as the money man, might have similar reservations about local acceptance.
Wow. That's quite understanding, given the circumstances.
It shows his grasp of reality, I think. But that rejection, that Hollywood ceiling, was ultimately what pushed him back to Hong Kong in 1971. And that decision changed everything.
Because back in Hong Kong, he wasn't a sidekick anymore.
No way. He signed with Golden Harvest, the up-and-coming studio run by Raymond Chow. And his first film, back as the lead, The Big Boss, in 1971. It was an absolute sensation.
An overnight star.
Pretty much. It smashed box office records all across Asia, made him an instant superstar. He immediately followed it up with Fist of Fury in 1972, which broke the records the Big Boss had just set.
What made these films so different? What was he doing that resonated so much?
It was the realism of the action, combined with his incredible charisma. Hong Kong action films before Lee often used that very stylized, Peking opera-influenced choreography, almost like a dance.
Right, more theatrical.
Very. Lee brought something completely different. Raw, brutal, incredibly fast, street-level combat. It felt dangerous, visceral. It was like nothing audiences had seen before, especially not from a Chinese hero figure. And he radiated this intense confidence and national pride.
And then came The Way of the Dragon in 1972, where he took even more control.
Total control. He wrote it, directed it, starred in it, and choreographed all the fights. That was his statement film.
And it features that legendary fight scene.
Against Chuck Norris.
No.
In the actual Roman Colosseum, it's still considered one of the greatest martial arts duels ever put on film. Just an incredible showcase of different styles, speed, power, tension. Both Fist of Fury and Way of the Dragon were massive international hits, too, grossing huge amounts worldwide.
But the real global game changer was his next project.
Enter the Dragon, 1973. This was the big one.
Why was it so significant?
It was the first major co-production between a Hollywood studio, Warner Bros., ironically, and a Hong Kong studio, Golden Harvest. It had a relatively small budget for a Hollywood film, about $850,000 back then.
Then it's exploded.
Exploded doesn't even cover it. Estimates vary, but it grossed something like $400 million worldwide on that initial release. Adjusted for inflation, that's easily over $2 billion today. It single-handedly launched the global kung fu craze of the 70s. It made Bruce Lee an immortal icon worldwide.
Tragically, he died just before its release. And his final film project remained unfinished, right? Game of Death.
Yeah, that's the unfinished masterpiece. He started shooting Game of Death in 1972 before Enter the Dragon. His concept was really philosophical. A fighter ascending a pagoda, facing a master of a different style on each level, representing the limitations of fixed systems.
And it featured some amazing collaborators.
It did. He filmed incredible fight scenes with some of his actual students and martial arts peers, like Dan Inosanto, Jihan Jay, and most famously, the 7'2" basketball legend Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Who was one of Lee's actual JKD students.
Yes. But then the Enter the Dragon opportunity came up, so he paused, filming Game of Death. After his death, Robert Klaus, the director of Enter the Dragon, was brought in to finish Game of Death.
But how could they finish it without him?
Well, finish is a generous term. They essentially cobbled it together. They used body doubles, awkward disguises, even reportedly pasted cutouts of Lee's face onto mirrors. They built a flimsy plot around the incredible fight footage Lee had already shot.
So the version released in 1978
Contains only about 15 minutes of actual Bruce Lee footage. But that footage, the pagoda fights, Lee in that iconic yellow and black tracksuit fighting Kareem, it's some of the most famous and analyzed martial arts action ever filmed.
Let's shift focus a bit from the films to the man himself. The sources go into incredible detail about his physical discipline. At 5'8", he wasn't a huge guy, but his power-to-weight ratio was legendary.
It was off the charts. And it came from an incredibly rigorous, almost scientific approach to fitness, especially after that Wong Jack Man fight experience made him reassess his physical conditioning.
How did his training change then?
He moved beyond just traditional martial arts practice and embraced total fitness. Strength training, cardiovascular endurance, extreme flexibility. He was one of the first martial artists to really integrate modern bodybuilding techniques. And this is key with a specific goal.
Which was?
Functional power, not just bulk. He deliberately avoided getting too muscle-bound, what he called overdone muscle mass.
Why? Wouldn't more muscle mean more power?
He believed excessive bulk would hinder his flexibility and, most critically, slow down his speed and reaction time. Everything was geared towards maximizing explosive power, agility, and elasticity. He famously trained his abdominals relentlessly, believing the core was the absolute engine for power generation.
And his diet was just as disciplined?
Oh, completely. He treated his body like a high-performance machine, very strict about nutrition. He avoided junk food, refined flour, anything he considered empty calories. Lots of high-protein drinks, juices, vitamin supplements.
I read he didn't like dairy.
Yeah, apparently had a strong dislike for the taste or texture of milk, so he often used powdered milk in his protein shakes instead, always finding ways to optimize.
We touched on his training with Jean LaBelle earlier. Can we talk more about how he integrated grappling? Because his films are so striking-focused.
That's a really important point about JKD's philosophy in action. He was absolutely dedicated to being a complete fighter. He trained extensively in judo with practitioners like Fred Soto and Wally J in Seattle and California, learning throws, sweeps, joint locks.
And the LaBelle connection brought in wrestling.
Catch wrestling elements, yes. Submissions, controlling opponents on the ground. He was constantly cross-training, absorbing anything practical. And you do see glimpses of it in his films. At a Soto-Gari leg sweep here, a quick armbar or neck crank there, like the one he uses on Sammo Hung in the opening of Enter the Dragon.
But why wasn't it more prominent? If JKD is about using everything, why weren't there long grappling sequences?
That was the pragmatic filmmaker side of him kicking in. He reportedly felt that extended grappling exchanges just weren't visually distinctive enough for action cinema. Audiences, especially then, wanted the flashy kicks, the rapid-fire punches.
So a balance between martial reality and cinematic spectacle.
Exactly. He knew grappling was essential for real fighting. He trained it seriously. But for the screen, he prioritized the high-impact visuals of striking, using grappling more for transitions or quick, decisive finishes.
Now let's talk about the mind behind the muscle. His physical discipline was incredible, but so was his intellectual life. He was a serious reader, a thinker.
A voracious reader. His personal library was huge, spanning thousands of books, and incredibly diverse. He was reading Western philosophy, Plato, Descartes, Spinoza, Hume.
The foundations of Western rationalism and empiricism.
Right. But he was equally immersed in Eastern thought. Taoism, Lao Tzu, Chuang Tzu, Zen Buddhism, and he was deeply influenced by the Indian philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti.
Krishnamurti, how did he fit in?
Krishnamurti emphasized self-knowledge, questioning all authority, and freeing the mind from conditioning and dogma. That resonated massively with Lee's own drive to break free from rigid martial arts traditions.
So how did he weave all these different threads, Plato and Lao Tzu, Descartes and Zen, into a philosophy of combat?
He saw martial arts, especially JKD, as ultimately a vehicle for self-discovery. All knowledge, he believed, ultimately leads to self-knowledge. Taoism gave him the concepts of flow, adaptability, yielding the be water idea. Western philosophy gave him the tools for critical analysis, for questioning assumptions, for justifying his break from tradition.
So JKD wasn't just about fighting techniques, it was a metaphor for life.
That's exactly how he framed it. Self-expression through movement, liberating oneself from limiting patterns, whether in combat or in thought.
And where did religion fit into this? Was he spiritual?
He was very clear about that, actually. He was explicitly an atheist.
Really?
Yes. In a well-known 1972 interview, when asked about his religious affiliation, his answer was simply, none whatsoever.
Hmm.
When the interviewer pressed, "You don't believe in God?" Lee replied, "To be perfectly frank, I really do not."
That's quite definitive.
It fits his overall philosophy. His focus was on the individual, on self-reliance, on empirical reality and direct experience, not on dogma or faith in the unseen. It put him at odds with more traditional hierarchical worldviews like Confucianism.
And this drive for self-expression even extended to poetry.
He wrote a lot of poetry,
Mhm.
often described as quite dark, intense, paradoxical, sometimes categorized as anti-poetry because it broke conventions.
How did it connect to his martial arts?
Linda Lee Cadwell, his wife, said his poems explored the deeper, less exposed recesses of the human psyche. The free verse style, the raw emotion, the lack of rigid structure, it perfectly mirrors the philosophy of JKD. It's no accident that his most famous quote, "Be formless, shapeless, like water," sounds exactly like a line of free verse poetry. It's all part of the same integrated philosophy of authentic self-expression.
We have to talk about his death. Passing away at 32, at the absolute peak of his global fame,
Yeah.
it's still shocking. And it remains shrouded in mystery and controversy.
It really does. And what many people forget, or maybe don't know, is that there was a major warning sign just 2 months before he died.
What happened then?
On May 10th, 1973, while he was doing ADR, basically dialogue replacement work, for Enter the Dragon in a hot dubbing room, he suddenly collapsed.
It collapsed.
Yeah. He experienced violent convulsions, seizures, severe headaches. He was rushed to the hospital unconscious. Doctors there diagnosed him with cerebral edema, severe swelling of the brain.
Cerebral edema, brain swelling.
His brain had swelled significantly, from a normal weight of around 1,400 grams to nearly 1,575 grams. It was life-threatening. They managed to save him by administering mannitol, a drug that reduces swelling.
So he'd already suffered the exact condition that would eventually kill him just 2 months earlier.
Exactly, which makes his actual death on July 20, 1973, even more tragic, perhaps. Let's walk through the timeline of that day, based on the official accounts.
Okay.
He spent the afternoon working, met with producer Raymond Chow around 2 p.m. They were discussing the script for Game of Death. Around 4 p.m., they drove together to the apartment of Betty Ting Pei, a Taiwanese actress who is set to co-star in the film.
To continue working on the script.
Yes. They worked for a few hours. Then around 7:30 p.m., Lee complained of a headache.
Just a headache.
Apparently so. Betty Ting Pei gave him a prescription painkiller tablet called Equigesic. It's a combination drug containing aspirin and a tranquilizer called meprobamate. He took the pill and went to lie down for a nap.
And he never woke up.
Raymond Chow left Ting Pei's apartment shortly after Lee lay down, arranging to meet him later for dinner with actor George Lazenby to discuss his potential role in Game of Death. When Lee didn't show up, Chow went back to Ting Pei's apartment around 9:45 p.m.
And found him.
Found him unresponsive. They couldn't wake him. They called the doctor, who tried resuscitation for about 10 minutes, but couldn't revive him. Lee was rushed by ambulance to Queen Elizabeth Hospital, but he was declared dead on arrival.
Just like that. So what was the official cause of death determined by the coroner?
The official verdict, delivered after an inquest led by senior British pathologist Donald Tier, was death by misadventure.
Misadventure. What did that mean in this context?
Tier concluded the cause was acute cerebral edema, that same brain swelling he'd experienced in May, resulting from a hypersensitive allergic reaction to one or more of the compounds in the Equigesic tablet he took, likely the meprobamate component.
An allergic reaction. But hadn't he taken that drug before?
That was immediately the controversial part. Yes, sources indicated he had taken Equigesic previously without any apparent ill effects. So a sudden, fatal allergic reaction seemed unlikely to some.
And there was the cannabis finding too, right? That fueled a lot of speculation early on.
It absolutely did. Traces of cannabis were found in his stomach and intestines during the autopsy. The Hong Kong tabloids ran wild with drug overdose theories. But pathologist Hare, who was very experienced, was adamant in his testimony.
What did he say about the cannabis?
He stated very clearly that linking the cannabis to the cause of death, the cerebral edema, would be, in his words, irresponsible and irrational. He saw no physiological connection. That finding was later backed up by another independent pathologist at the inquest.
But given his almost mythical status, the official verdict didn't stop the conspiracy theories.
Not a chance. The sudden death of such a vibrant icon, the theories started immediately and have never really stanked. Triad assassination, a delayed reaction from a fight injury, poisoning by rivals, even a mystical dim maggot death touch, or a family curse.
All sorts of sensational ideas.
Exactly. They often overshadowed the more complex medical possibilities for decades.
Okay, so let's move beyond the initial verdict and the wild rumors. In more recent years, medical experts have revisited the case, proposing alternative theories based on modern understanding. What are they?
There are three main modern medical hypotheses that challenge the simple equigesic allergy explanation. The first emerged around 2018, the heat stroke theory.
Heat stroke causing brain swelling.
Precisely. Hyperthermia. This theory connects back to Lee's known intensity, his tendency to push himself physically, potentially leading to overheating. But there's a specific factor here.
What's that?
In 1972, Lee had apparently undergone surgery to remove the sweat glands from his armpits.
Why would he do that?
Reportedly because he thought underarm sweat stains looked bad on film. He was very conscious of his image.
So removing sweat glands, that would impair his body's ability to cool itself.
Significantly. So the theory is, intense exertion, maybe dehydration, combined with this surgically reduced ability to thermoregulate, could have led to heat stroke, causing the fatal cerebral edema, a potential link between vanity and physiology.
Okay, that's one theory. What's the second, more recent one from 2022 about hyponatremia?
Right, hyponatremia. This one's a bit more complex, but it's gained traction. Hyponatremia basically means having too little sodium salt in your blood, usually because you've consumed excessive amounts of water without replacing electrolytes.
So drinking too much water can be dangerous.
It can be fatal. If your kidneys can't excrete the excess water fast enough, your body's fluids become diluted, causing cells to swell, including brain cells. That leads to cerebral edema.
And how would that apply to Lee?
The researchers proposing this point to several factors. Lee's known high fluid intake, possibly including lots of water or special liquid diets. His intense exercise potentially leading to large water consumption, evidence of cannabis use, which can increase thirst, and potentially other factors like prescription drug use or alcohol that might have impaired his kidney's ability to excrete water.
So his body essentially drowned its own brain cells with too much fluid and not enough salt.
That's the hypothesis. They argue his kidneys were overwhelmed, leading to the edema. The symptoms leading up to his death, including the headache and possible fatigue, are consistent with hyponatremia.
Okay, heat stroke, hyponatremia. What's the third, even more recent suggestion from just this year, 2025? Pseudobo.
SUDEP stands for Sudden Unexpected Death in Epilepsy. This is perhaps the most compelling recent theory put forward by medical experts reviewing the case.
Epilepsy. We know he had that seizure back in May.
It's exactly. His collapse in May 1973 include confirmed epileptic seizures. HEDEAP is a known, though not fully understood, cause of death specifically in people with epilepsy. It often happens during or immediately after a seizure, sometimes even during sleep, and the exact mechanism isn't always clear.
So the argument is that his death wasn't an allergic reaction or heat stroke or water intoxication, but a direct consequence of his underlying epilepsy.
That's what these experts suggest. They argue that the other explanations, like the equigesic allergy, are statistically very improbable. The SUDEP explanation aligns perfectly with his known medical history, the diagnosed epilepsy from the May incident.
And why wasn't this considered the cause back in 1973?
Well, SUDEP wasn't as well understood then, but the experts also raised the possibility, perhaps a controversial one, that the epilepsy diagnosis itself or its potential link to his death might have been downplayed or even concealed at the time.
Why? To protect his image?
Possibly. To protect the image of this seemingly invincible Superman. Admitting a condition like epilepsy might have been seen as tarnishing his legacy or implying a weakness. So there's another layer of tragedy, the possibility that the true cause was known or suspected, but obscured.
Whatever the exact cause of his death, his impact was already cemented and has only grown. Let's talk about that legacy. He wasn't just an action star. He was a genuine cultural force, especially in breaking racial barriers.
Absolutely fundamental. You really cannot overstate how revolutionary his screen presence was for the portrayal of Asian men, particularly in the West.
Also.
Before Bruce Lee, think about the common stereotypes of Asian men in Hollywood films. often emasculated, desexualized figures. The Fu Manchu villain, the subservient houseboy, the comical laundry worker.
Right. Very limited and often negative roles.
Lee smashed those stereotypes to pieces. He presented an Asian man who was powerful, charismatic, disciplined, intelligent, undeniably masculine, and, yes, sexy. He projected this incredible confidence and pride in his Chinese heritage and made it cool, made it powerful for a global audience.
And his appeal wasn't just universal, it had a specific resonance with certain communities, right?
Hugely resonant, especially initially among a minority audiences in North America, Black, Asian, Hispanic communities. Rapper LL Cool J famously talked about how Lee was one of the very first non-white heroes he saw on screen as a kid who was just kicking ass, dominating. For many Black Americans in the 70s, Lee was second only to Muhammad Ali in terms of heroic stature. He offered a powerful image of non-white strength and defiance.
Beyond representation, his impact on martial arts itself is profound. He's often called the father of mixed martial arts. Is that accurate?
I think it's entirely accurate. And you don't just have to take my word for it. Dana White, the president of the UFC, has explicitly called Bruce Lee the father of mixed martial arts.
Why? What's the direct connection?
It's his core philosophy, Jeet Kune Do. The idea of using no way as way, of taking useful techniques from any style, boxing, wrestling, kung fu, fencing, whatever works, and discarding the limitations of rigid traditional systems. That is the philosophical bedrock of modern MMA. JKD was arguably the first truly open-source approach to combat.
So he was advocating for mixing styles long before the UFC existed.
Decades before. He wasn't just theorizing, he was doing it, training it, embodying it. He directly inspired the pioneers of American kickboxing, guys like Joe Louis and Benny Urquidez, who trained with him or were heavily influenced by him.
And that influence extends right up to today's top fighters.
Absolutely. You see modern UFC champions like John Jones using techniques Lee popularized,
Yeah.
like the oblique kick to the knee, a classic JKD weapon. Conor McGregor has openly cited Lee as an inspiration and even compared his own adaptable style to Lee's philosophy, saying Lee would have been a champion in the UFC. The lineage is undeniable.
His influence seems to seep into almost every corner of popular culture, too. Comics.
Stan Lee himself, the Marvel Comics legend, called Bruce Lee a superhero without a costume. He said Lee was the inspiration for Marvel's first major martial arts heroes, Shang-Chi and Iron Fist. Stan Lee basically credited Bruce Lee as the originator of that whole archetype in Western comics.
Video games as well.
Oh, fundamentally, the entire beat-em-up and fighting game genres owe a massive debt to his films. The very first side-scrolling beat-em-up, Kung Fu Master from 1984, was directly based on the pagoda structure of Game of Death.
And Street Fighter.
The whole concept of Street Fighter, an international tournament bringing together fighters with diverse styles from around the world, is lifted straight from the plot structure of Enter the Dragon. That film basically provided a template for nearly every fighting game that followed.
It's incredible. Even things like breakdancing.
Yeah. Early B-boys, pioneers, like the rock-steady crew, have talked about being inspired by Lee's dynamic movements. His athleticism, specific power moves like the windmill, have been linked back to his influence.
And parkour, too.
The Yamakasi, the French founders of parkour, cited Lee's philosophy of movement, efficiency, overcoming obstacles, and his martial arts discipline as a major inspiration. They even called him their unofficial president.
It's just staggering how wide his influence spread. And he received formal recognition, too, like being named one of Time magazine's most important people of the 20th century.
Deservedly so. But maybe one of the most unusual and telling tributes is that statue of him in Mostar, Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Right, why Mostar? That seems unexpected.
It was erected in 2005, actually unveiled the day before the famous one in Hong Kong. Mostar was a city deeply divided along ethnic and religious lines after the brutal Bosnian War. The statue of Bruce Lee was put up specifically as a symbol of unity.
A unifying figure against ethnic division.
Exactly, because he transcended nationality, ethnicity, and ideology. He was seen as this shared symbol of strength, discipline, and mastery that everyone, regardless of background, could admire. It speaks volumes about his universal appeal.
It really does. It captures that synthesis he achieved, action and philosophy, East and West, body and mind. We've spent this time talking about how he constantly broke down barriers, rejected rigid thinking, emphasized adaptation, flow, living that core idea.
Be formless, shapeless, like water. It really was his life's motto, embodied in everything he did.
Which brings us back maybe to the ultimate paradox surrounding his death. Here's a man whose entire philosophy revolved around adaptation, fluidity, overcoming limitations.
Yeah.
Yet he was ultimately brought down by the sudden, unexpected rigidity, the catastrophic failure of his own body, and perhaps by the limitations of medical science at that time to fully understand or diagnose what was happening to him.
It's a profound irony.
Yeah.
He preached being like water, adaptable, but his own physiology encountered a fatal block, a fatal swelling.
And even now, 50 years later, as we've discussed, the exact reason why is still being debated, still being uncovered by modern science. He dedicated his life to the pursuit of self-knowledge, and in death, his own complex story forces us to keep searching, keep questioning. It makes you wonder, what else will we learn about Bruce Lee, this truly legendary, complex, and boundary-shattering figure in the years ahead? It definitely leaves you with a lot to think about.